Air pistols have been made in many countries over the years. United States, Taiwan, Germany, England, China, and Canada. Welcome back to Canuck Air. What we have here is clearly marked as being a Shakespeare Canada Acro 1, an actual Canadian-made air pistol. Some have said this styling of it was intended to look like a Thompson-centric Contender, a single-shot target silhouette type pistol. It was introduced in the 1960s, which this gun was introduced around the same time, so it seems likely to inspire it, especially this trigger guard with the extra finger rest on it. Don't know how practical it is, but it does look kind of neat. It is a single shot 22 caliber pistol. You load it by pulling back the bolt here, dropping a pellet in, pushing forward. The CO2, of course, is kept in the grip. Behind is clipped on. I haven't actually pierced that cartridge. I don't actually know if this gun works or not yet. I haven't found out. What I plan on doing is tearing it all down apart and find out what I can inside, and before I proceed with trying to put any gas through it. This gun here does have a few issues. It is missing the rear sight. There should be a rear sight that slides over top of that. And my parts gun that I bought at the same time, this one here, has that piece, so excellent. I can use that. This one has a fairly crude repair done here. That's a mess. Yeah. And it's also got a broken trigger guard, so this will likely just stay as a parts gun. This, though, seems to be worth working on. This is the newer gun. There's a date code inside here that says this was made in February 73. Two little dots with a 73 in there. This other gun is earlier. Its date code suggests July of 1969. So they were made over quite a number of years. The Blue Book says 68 to 75. That sounds about correct for what we're looking at here. Despite the fact some people on the internet or whatever say these guns are rare and were only made for a year. Well, clearly that doesn't seem to be the case. Other fun facts, other fun differences between the guns. There's a few actually that you'd expect that if they're made over a certain number of years. This one has an interesting vent hole right here, which I think is to vent gas out the front of the gun if by some chance you put the pellet in and didn't turn the bolt to align the transfer port from the gas valve to the barrel. So if you fired the gun, that gas would blast out of the valve and then have to go somewhere. And I'm thinking that they've got a channel through the casting out the front here. Weirdly enough, the newer gun lacks that. So when I take it apart, I'm going to find out what I can as to what's going on there. Perhaps the biggest difference between the guns, the most interesting thing, is that when you look down the barrel of this thing, you see what people say about them is they're just a smoothbore gun. 22 caliber, no rifling. And I've seen that listed somewhere, that they, despite the fact that some people say they're really accurate guns, a lot of fun to shoot, they don't have any rifling in them. Except that this one is rifled. The newer gun has a rifled barrel. So I'm guessing at some point in production they were able to get a hold of rifled barrels, or they felt they had to compete with other guns on the market, put some rifling in them. So we'll see how that kind of turns out. The finish on both these guns is fairly rough. It's paint missing here and there. Probably could be a fun candidate for refinishing. Could go crazy and do a tan camo kind of thing, but no, I think I'll just stick with black. It'd be different to have had 3 or 4 of them. It might be fun to make one a different color, but I don't think that's going to happen. The gun works simply enough. gas goes up to the valve, and here there's a hammer. When we get it apart, we'll see how that all kind of works. You push it forward to cock the hammer, and then you just fire. And the hammer slams back, opens the valve, gas blasts down the barrel, and off you go. Simple, straightforward, and when we take it apart, we'll see how really nice and simple the mechanism is inside there. It must have made them fairly cost-effective to manufacture. So, yeah, let's have some fun with this. The 1974 Guns Illustrated has the Acro 1 doing about 365 feet per second. Maybe in 177, I don't think 22. Later guns were sold as the Ampel Plinkenwiz in the US. That's not really a name I can kind of get behind. However, in Canada, the Shakespeare, this is an early ad I think from Canadian Tire, sold the gun at $9.88. That's about $70 to $80 in today's money. Well, let's get started on taking this Shakespeare Acro 1 apart, see what we can find out. The grip just comes off. With the CO2 cartridge, the first thing you're supposed to do is remove the rear sight, which this rear sight came off my other parts gun. This one doesn't have one anyway. And then you have to remove the muzzle piece on the end. There's one long Allen screw that goes right through into there. We'll pull that one off of there. Take that right out as that goes right down into the barrel. And then we just knock this piece out. Oh, it came off easily. This piece doesn't appear to have been cast in the most straight way possible. It's just a little bit, looks a little crooked. But that's probably just cosmetic anyway. It probably doesn't matter. The casting on this one has this ugly seam across the top here, so if I do end up refinishing it, I'll file that down, because this earlier gun doesn't have that problem at all. Sorry, the casting's already a part of that. I took the screws out so we could compare the two. This gun, marked as Shakespeare, made in Canada, but it was sold in the United States as an Ampel Acro 1. Playtime Products apparently was the parent company that was selling them in the US. So it's an interesting question as to what do we really have here? Is this a Canadian designed gun or American designed gun? I know that I think the Ampel guns, there was some reference to parts made in Canada. Well, last time I checked, air guns were in fact made of parts, so yeah. So here, oh, here's how that sits. Okay, I'll have to figure that out when I make sure I put that back correctly, because, yeah, that was a bit bent, isn't it? That's the trigger, just a pretty straightforward piece of sheet metal. It's roughly stamped out, it has fairly crude surfaces, which mate with the back of the hammer. This is the hammer right here. When you pull it forward, it catches on there. You pull the trigger, it slams back and hits the valve. So let's have a look at what we got here, see if we can get this out. These parts look a little cleaner than the other gun. Looks like a little nicer spring. The hammer, to get the hammer out, you do have to undo this other screw right here. As of course that is the cocking piece. Pull it out there like that. Hammer just lifts off. Does look a little nicer than the other one in the other gun. And then this is the gas release right here. When the hammer hits it, pushes that pin in like that and allows CO2 gas to blast up through that hole right there into the bottom of the barrel. We do have a rubber transfer port part here, which I don't have on the other gun. Don't think there's anything there at all there. No, just a gap between the transfer port and the barrel, so obviously something missing there, because that wouldn't have worked very well at all. And this is the barrel assembly right here, which should just lift out. And this, as I said, this one is actually rifled. The other one is smooth bore. It's kind of hard to see down it, and the rifling is fairly shallow, but it is there. So, and you can see this is how locks up. When you pull back, the pellet gets dropped in there, push forward, rotate, and then the port lines up right there, which doesn't line up terribly well. The other gun's similar as well, but I guess that's enough to let the gas in. Little nub right there on the top, which indexes it for correct upright alignment when you put that first screw in. So there we have it. This is a part. And yes, this is a slightly different casting. As I said, I think if you don't close the breech off and you fire the gun, there's going to be massive buildup of gas right here, and it has to go somewhere. My guess is it'll just blow out through this port right here. But the earlier gun, you've got this channel that comes down on both guns here, and then it bleeds out through these two little holes right there. This one doesn't have them, unless those holes have some other weird purpose. I can't imagine what. There's also some sort of blob of epoxy in there. Pretty strong stuff. I'm wondering if actually that probably covers up a defect in the casting. Quite likely at the factory there might have been a small gap when they cast it. And instead of tossing it, they filled it with epoxy, and then the paint on the outside would just cover that over. So, interesting. This one here doesn't have that problem. Again, made a few years later, so probably maybe they got some of the bugs out of the production. But there we go, fairly straightforward. I think this is aluminum. I don't think this is what you'd call a white metal or a zinc alloy. I think this is an actual aluminum casting, but again, I'm not a metallurgist, so can't see for sure. That spring definitely needs to be sorted out a little bit, but there we go. There's the basic parts of a Shakespeare Acro 1, aka Ampel Acro 1. Very cool. Let's proceed. So here's the Acro 1, Shakespeare Acro 1, all naked. All the paint has been stripped off. Took quite a bit of doing. That was baked on pretty darn hard at the factory. I left all the inside parts. Don't need to take it out of there. But the outside, just to give it a cosmetic refresh, get all the scratches and pits out of it. Took it down to bare metal, which, yes, I do believe this is an aluminum casting. Any sort of zinc metal would have been a lot easier to work on. I took off some of the rough and sharp edges off the edges of the castings all around the trigger guard, smoothed everything off, filed it down, and then polished it a bit with the Dremel tool. And yeah, it looks pretty good. The other thing that needed to be done was there was a repair that needed to be made. Normally, this gun has two pins, one here and one here, that hold the grip on in place, just align it, stop it from wriggling around. This one was broken off, as you probably remember earlier. So I drilled it out, and I put in a alloy metal peg that I happened to have from a piece of scrap metal, cut it down to size, put it in there, and the grip now sits on nice and flush and won't wriggle around when when it's all back together again. The final bit of friction that holds it on, of course, is when the CO2 cylinder's in there, the grip snaps onto it. So the next step will be to give it a coat of primer, sand that back a bit, and then paint it a nice semi-gloss black if I can find some paint. So yeah, it's all coming together. Well, so I finished painting the Acro 1, Shakespeare Acro 1 exterior parts. All looks like it's pretty decently hardened up. It'll probably take a few days or weeks for the paint to properly cure, so I'd be careful not to scratch it in the meantime. Okay. First thing I guess we do is we drop in the barrel, which I have not cleaned. I should definitely do that first. Well, because this is a 22 caliber gun, I can use my regular 22 caliber cleaning kit. It's one of the fun things about having a 177 is a cleaning rod is not something you find on the shelf everywhere. Boy, that's tight. That is really tight. This is the barrel that has rifling. It's pretty shallow, but it is there. That has to sit right here somewhere. Well, the Acro 1 is all back together again. I put the cylinder in it a few days ago and took that first shot, and it holds gas. It has been holding pressure steadily now for several days. I fired a few pellets through it here and there just to see if there's any leaks. So far so good, which is a bit of a shock for what is a 50-year-old piece of rubber or synthetic rubber holding back all that pressure. Was there any secret sauce of how I managed to accomplish that? Well, I just used the old trick of I soaked the gas valve, dunked it entirely in this little film container full of transmission stop slip. Reconditions and protects transmission seals. I guess it's specially formulated to rejuvenate things like, I guess, synthetic seals. So perfect for air guns. It's an old trick that people have been using for a while, and did it work in this instance? Maybe it did. I didn't actually test it before I took it all apart. But it does seem to work. So first shots with the gun, I tried first off to try one of my basic pellets I was going to put into it. Interesting thing with this, they don't fit. You cannot get that pellet to go into that little tiny window where you have to load the pellets. So something to consider. I guess they didn't have pellets that long back in those days. So what I've been using is these H&N Excite hammer pellets, which are just that little bit shorter and a little more traditional size and shape. I've got the lights turned down dim a bit here, so that doesn't, so I don't overhead lights don't influence the chronograph. But let's take a few test shots here and see what kind of velocities we might get out of this thing. .343. That's pretty good, and about what you might expect for a 22 caliber air pistol. 22s don't generate very much more than that. Otherwise, they have to be bigger, heavier, or run through more CO2. And that's about all you really need for an air pistol. 334. So a little bit less there. Starting to appreciate the balance and the feel of this gun a bit. It is an inexpensively made gun. It's not as fancy or precise or precision a gun that I thought it might have been. Looking at those old catalogs years and years ago, I thought maybe this was a bit more deluxe of an offering. It isn't. It's fairly clearly made to be quickly assembled with fairly few parts, and to be sold for a fairly affordable price, I guess. 331. But that said, there is a niceness to it. The shape is unusual, but it's comfortable in the hand. No, I'm not left-handed, so I'll be shooting it right-handed when I take it to the range. 329. The sights do look pretty good. The balance, it's got a fairly heavy butt to it. That's where the weight of all the casting is. The rest of it is quite slender, and it is very slender through the grip too, which I'm starting to appreciate more and more in pistol design. Used to, target guns having wide, fat grips with your hands spread out quite wide. I'm starting to like, that one didn't register. I'm starting to like a narrower, more slender grip these days. Not sure why, but... So this is definitely a slender gun in that regard. .326. I can't believe this CO2 cartridge is holding up. I mean, I've put quite a... I didn't count the number of shots I've taken with it, but it's well over 30. .322. Yeah. So the next step will have to be to take it out to the range and see what it can do at a target and see what kind of accuracy we can get out of it. Remember, this gun here has the rifle barrel. The earlier gun was the parts gun I've robbed a few things out of. That one didn't register either. Maybe my chronograph battery's getting low. They don't last forever. But, yeah, there we go. 311. Well, that's starting to drop down a little bit. Maybe we are starting to lose a little bit of gas. But, yeah, we'll have to see what sort of accuracy we can get out of it. The older gun had a smooth bore, and obviously at some point in production they upgraded to rifle barrels, or had the money for it, or the market demanded it. 309. Yeah, maybe we're starting to lose pressure now. Wouldn't surprise me. That's a good number of shots out of just one CO2 cartridge. All that gas held in by a 50-year-old. 50-year-old synthetic seal. 311. I was all set to actually make a new seal for this gun. I got some heavy-duty sort of urethane type material I was going to cut down if this thing didn't hold gas, but it's holding. So anyway, next step, we'll take it to the range and see how it does there. So here's the Acro 1 at the range, trying hard to shoot it well over sandbags. Definitely found that when you're shooting from the bags, the sight picture is a bit closer to your eyes than you'd like. The gun would definitely do better stretched out at full arm's length. And the trigger is fairly creepy and hard to pull, so you can definitely see the sights twitch around a bit as you're trying to release. It doesn't help. First up pellets for accuracy testing was the RWS Superdome field pellets. This first group wasn't terribly good. The second group with the same pellet did a bit better, but it's not terrible. These 5 here went into a 22mm group, so again, that's slightly under an inch, so not so bad with from an air pistol from a rest at 10 meters. I can't complain. This last group here is with the more expensive Air Arms Diablo field pellets, but I didn't get a overall great group. But the last 3 pellets went into one pretty small, almost one ragged hole, so I think I was refining my sight picture a bit better with it. So yeah, this gun has potential, especially if I get that trigger sorted out. All in all, I really enjoyed working with the Shakespeare Acro 1. It was a air pistol that time forgot. I'd never seen one before, even though I had been aware of them back in the day. It's nicely made, given that it was quite affordable, you know, back in the day. Yeah, it's no serious target pistol, but it was definitely fun to shoot with, and there's some potential to refine it a bit further in the future. All in all, thanks for watching. I'll be back with something fun pretty soon.